Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I am your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Seabass of WNWS of Jackson, Tennessee. This episode is presented by Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center. Wellspire offers personal and professional development opportunities in a beautiful facility in the Gulch neighborhood. Stop by for an event with world-renowned speakers or host an off-site event that will wow your team or your clients. We also thank our co-presenting sponsor, the Well Coffee House, which turns coffee into water and has a mission to bring clean water to the world. Our news is presented by Sutherland & Belk, an SEC sports-loving injury firm in Nashville. These guys will shoot you straight on your rights and options when you've been injured in an accident. Call them at 615-846-6200 to get your questions answered. You can also visit them online at sbinjurylaw.com. Well, no new news. Everybody's still waiting on Romello White. He is the Arizona State transfer who is considering Vanderbilt after he entered the transfer portal. White averaged a little bit over 10 points and almost 9 rebounds last year at Arizona State. The guest line is presented by Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. Had no clue what I was missing in Boll & Branch sheets until I got some. They are fair trade certified, meaning they are made under safe conditions by men and women treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you won't want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted the best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code VANDY and get $50 off your first set of sheets. Seabass joins us from WNWS in Jackson, Tennessee. He is on with us every week. My friend, thank you for joining us today on this wintry spring day.
Chris, it is my absolute pleasure. You know, it's supposed to get down to 39 here tonight.
It's crazy.
Because I swore it was May 6th. Yeah, but I'll take that over a 78-mile-an-hour winds. How about that?
It feels like it should be Vanderbilt baseball weather. I've always said this for 10, 12 years running, that if you ever want to know if Vanderbilt's got a home schedule or a home series for the coming weekend, just check the forecast, and if the temperature suddenly drops 20 or 30 degrees or there's a lot of rain, that means they'll be at home. So I can't explain it anymore.
Yeah, I did. By the way, did you see that video I told you to look at about the dudes on the roof when that storm blew through Nashville the other day?
No, I've thought about it, but I haven't checked it. But tell people what you looked at.
So I'm sure most people have seen it by now, but it was the Sunday storms, I think it was, and some cats were working on a roof there around Nashville. They didn't have the shingles on yet, and that storm crept up on them. And they're up there near 80-mile-an-hour winds, and the 2-story house looked like on top of the roof, at the top of the roof right there. And I think one of them jumped down a little space that they had, but the other one I think was able to like hold on during all of that with boards flying all over the place. I'd have died of a heart attack. It wouldn't forget the weather or falling or getting struck by something. I'd have died of a heart attack. It was unbelievable. You get a chance to check that video out.
I'm watching it right now. I just pulled it up on my phone. Holy cow. These guys are lying flat on the roof, just holding on for dear life.
Yeah, that's that would haunt me the rest of my life. I promise I'd never get on the roof of a house again. I don't care if I owned a roofing company. I'd be done, Jack. That was crazy. I'm glad they made it out.
And it's raining so hard. Somebody is shooting this from an adjacent house. It's raining so hard that at one point you can barely see the house or the guys, which it starts out very clear, but the rain and the wind are so much that you can't see. Yeah, fortunately, they were near the apex of the house because they grabbed on, I guess, to the crown or whatever you call it, and like I said, held on for dear life. But other than that, I think if you're just on the part where there's nothing to grab, I don't know how they stayed on the roof.
All right, and I'm hoping everybody that is listening to this podcast that they're okay and that all their family is as well.
Yeah, we did not get hit here. We just lost some very small limbs, but other people lost big trees and all sorts of stuff. It has been a wild year.
A little bit. I was pretty hyped up about 2020, to be honest with you, but it has not really worked out so far.
2020 is going to go down as one of the worst years of our lifetime.
I certainly hope so, Chris. I certainly hope so.
We have problems if not.
Yeah, you got that right, man. So let's do this. Let's talk about a little black and gold, man.
Well, not much to talk. There's Romello White. I've discussed that on a podcast or two. Your thoughts on that one,
Yeah.
if it happens,
You
which
never
which I have
start
some
off a
concerns
podcast
that will
by
happen.
I will never start off a show or a podcast by saying there's not much to talk about. The Romello White thing is very interesting, Chris. I would really, really love to see this happen. Romello's what, about 6'8", 6'9", powerful dude inside. He's not a 2010 guy or anything like that, but it's like I told you the other day, this cat comes in, if they get him, and this cat comes in and gives this team 13-10, man, protects the rim a little bit and gets on them boards, man. I mean, that would be so valuable. I even asked Chris a hypothetical. Yeah, when we were talking about it the other day, I said, if you could have one person on the roster next year, Saban Lee or Romello White, who would it be? Now, I mean, look, logically, it's Saban Lee. I mean, Saban could go for 20, 30 points any night he wanted to. I just think. And I think the answer is Saban, Chris, but, just the thing about Romello is, I mean, I think he gives us something we simply just don't have. Now, I mean, we don't have a scorer, the likes of Saban, a guy who can create his own shot, a guy who can get to the bucket. We do in Scotty, but I feel a little bit better about our perimeter game, especially when you throw in Tyron Lawrence coming in next year. I know he's a freshman. I get all that. But in the post, I mean, look, I feel good about Cleavon coming back, but I just don't have a whole lot of faith in our post game on both ends of the court, and I think that Romello could go a long way in fixing that.
Oh, you say he's the guy that, however you phrased it, he's a guy that a lot of teams don't have. I mean, there's not a lot of guys with his skill set to go around anymore.
Right, and that's why I think Romello White might be the right answer to that question. Sentimentally, I would want Saban. And, like I said, I know that Saban can hit for 20, 30 points when he needs to, but we got to have somebody like that. There's no fear in the paint of Vanderbilt right now. There's not any. And we need to have that. I don't care how much the college game evolves, we need to have that post presence on both ends of the courts. And look, that would make Cleavon's job so much better. And the young man from Rice, what is it, Melora Brown, the young man from Rice, we need that type of presence. So I really, really hope they get him. And Chris, I have never really understood or been nearly in touch with the way the inner workings of the Vanderbilt admission process goes the way that you do. And I am certainly not comparing them to Ron Mercer in that situation. But I mean, how many times does this university have to learn a lesson? Admit this guy. This is not somebody who doesn't do schoolwork, who can't read, who just shoots fast. You either play in the SEC or you don't. It's one or the other. You either are an SEC team or you're not. There's no other school in this conference he wouldn't be able to get into like that, I would imagine. And if Candace is serious about this, and this university is serious about this, that they really want us to believe that they are all in, you can't let him go somewhere else. I don't want to see this dude at Georgia because we refuse admittance to a guy that's clearly good enough on the court and in the classroom to get into this school. Don't make this mistake again, Vanderbilt. If you do this, and it's not, I'm not going to come and say you're going to lose your whole fan base. We don't have much of one now, but I mean, you deny him admission, and you just basically said we're lying to y'all. This is how we see it. It doesn't matter how you see it. We are not all in on athletics. That's just the perception that I have of it. If they blow this, because it looks like, I guess at least surfacely, it looks like that Romello White wants to go to Vanderbilt, that he wants to be a Commodore, he wants to play for Jerry Stackhouse. Here we go. Show us how serious you really are.
I am thinking of how I would rank the roster next year. best to worst, if he's on that team, he is no worse than one of the top 3 players, and I would lean to saying probably the best player on that roster next year if he gets admitted and indeed signs or enrolls.
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing who your 2 were that were better.
Well, it's Scottie Pippen Jr. He's in the discussion. I mean, he played so well as a freshman. I think I would take White. I mean, I'm just thinking out loud, like trying to give myself an out here. I haven't put it under a microscope, but I think I would take White. The other one would be DJ Harvey. I just don't know how good he is, but I'm I'm almost sure that if you put a gun to my head, it's Romello White. I think it's either he or Pippen, and I'm pretty sure I would take him because, for one thing, Pippen really struggled to defend, was not good at all on that end. I think with White, you've got a little bit of rim protection there. So I think that as I talk through it, he gets the edge. And in fact, the more I think about it, I don't know that it's, well, I won't say it's not close because you factor in some freshman to sophomore improvement with Pippen, you would think. So there's that. But I think right now, knowing what we know, it's Romello White.
Yeah, I think so too. So I guess the question becomes now is, what do you think? I mean, because I think we probably both agree, but I'll let you say that should he gain admittance, that this is the likely destination. But what do you think the likelihood is of Vanderbilt admitting him?
I don't know. I outlined this on the board this morning and I talked about it a little bit on George Plaster's show. It is a very unique situation because he's graduating, I think, or has graduated. And so he's not a grad transfer. I mean, as you've heard me say many times, getting a player into grad school there is darn near impossible. So I think the route they are taking, from what we have heard, is he is trying to come back for a second bachelor's degree or major or whatever. And so it's weird because you don't usually see that. I don't usually see somebody going in for another degree. Well, at Vanderbilt, they will not let you take more than 60 hours, right? Which is not uncommon.
Okay.
Most schools do that. And the reason they do it is because, let's say, if you're Vanderbilt, you go to somewhere else, you come, say, for your last semester, you say, I've got a Vanderbilt degree. I mean, schools do that to protect themselves. So I have no fault with Vanderbilt's policy on that. My question is, okay, he's played 3 years at Arizona State. He's redshirted another year. So barring something crazy like a Cleavon Brown situation where he gets hurt and he gets a 6th year, although Cleavon only got 5, but you see what I'm getting at. He's only going to be in school for 1 year. So you're not going to finish another degree in that time. I don't know how the school will look at it. If they'll say, well, he's probably only going to be here another year. With that being said, he's not getting a degree anytime soon, especially with him already having another degree. I mean, the point in getting a degree is having a degree. The point of getting another degree, a lot of times, unless you were just looking for something that's totally different than the first major that's going to be relevant to a career, why would you do that? I think the answer in this case is he's trying to do it as a means to play basketball. Again, I'm with you. I think you admit him, it improves your program as a school. It's no skin off your back. But I don't know how Vanderbilt's going to look at it because it's such a different case, and it's one that I have never encountered in my years of running the site.
Well, somebody better figure something out, because I promise you, what is left of the fan base doesn't give a damn. They don't want to hear that, because they know that that dude would be admitted to every other school in this conference. And if they do this again, we're not in. I mean, you know what? I shouldn't speak for everybody else. I know this Vanderbilt fan would feel that way. You know, again, we're not talking about admitting somebody who's got a 16 on the ACT. I'm not asking you to do something with your academic integrity. I'm not asking you to compromise that by any stretch of the imagination. That's not what this is. Use your head, admit the guy, and let's go.
You made a good point, and you're not the only one that's made it. I think another person or two has mentioned it on the board, but that does put Candace Lee in the spotlight because I'm not saying it's her fault if he doesn't get admitted. I mean, Vanderbilt's Vanderbilt, and God knows if John Ingram can't pull strings sometimes and who's able to, but I think if he can't get in school, I do think it puts a pretty serious dent in any claim that she would make that she can get stuff done that other people can't.
Because this is not even a thing, Chris. It's not even that big a thing, unless you want to make it that way.
But let me be clear. We don't know that it's a thing yet. This is just, you've got to recognize it's a special situation. And, of course, at Vanderbilt, if any school is bound to overthink or do the wrong thing, I mean, it's Vandy.
And if it wasn't for that same exact feeling that I have, I wouldn't even sweat them about it. I'd sit back and wait to see what happens. But because I have so little faith in that, I got to see it first. I have to see it first, and then I might start to believe. Okay, job, Candace. Good job administrating. You're starting to come around. Nobody's asking you to find bag men and leave buckets of money and bring in people that shouldn't be there. That's not what this is. So talk to whoever they need to talk to, do whatever you got to do, but make it happen. That's all I can say. If not, because what the worst part would be, Chris, is to be that close. Know he wants to be there. They deny him. He goes somewhere else. Maybe even in this conference that we even have to play the dude, and he balls out. But here we got our righteous, however you want to phrase it. We stood by our guns. Well, yeah, you did, and we also won one conference game next year.
You have a good point, because if he doesn't go to Vanderbilt, I would think that Georgia would be at or near the top of the list.
Can you imagine that? Can you even imagine? Watch that dude, go to somewhere like Georgia and get 17-10, and make all SEC and help Georgia on a little bit of a run. That would be just about right. But you know what? I'm just going to sit back and wait and see what happens, because I really, really, I hate being teased. And, man, if just the possibility of a player of his caliber that I know major programs around the country would love to have, Chris. I mean, who wouldn't want to have Romello White on their program right now on the floor for them? Most teams would. Almost anybody could use a guy like that. So I'm going to sit back and hopefully Vanderbilt does the right thing and doesn't screw this up too.
Who's your all-Mello team? I got two more that I could put on there. They're pretty obvious.
What's an all-Mello team?
Well,
somebody with the name Mello in it?
LaMelo Ball, Carmelo Anthony.
So it's got to have Mello in it?
I think so.
Unless
it's just somebody who's just mellow by nature.
Can I count Romero Miller? That was close. That's so close, maybe say his name.
Maybe.
I'm counting Romero Miller. Wasn't there some twins, Lamangelo and Oran?
I think that's urban legend. But there was Mark Lemangelo for the Astros in the late 70s.
You know who I looked up today? You're going to remember this name because I think the dude played about 30 years ago, but for some reason his name popped up into my head. He never played at Vanderbilt. You remember H. Waldman?
I don't.
Played for UNLV. And I think he transferred to Southern Illinois or St. Louis or something like that. His name is literally the letter H.
I vaguely remember. So 30 years ago would have been right.
1990.
Right before. Well, no, that would have been right during peak Tarkanian years.
H. Waldman. I sure do remember him.
Yeah, that was
H. Waldman. Yeah, look him up.
God, that team was scary good.
The UNLV team that lost to Duke in the national championship, for my money, not anybody else's, but for Seabass's money, that's the best college basketball team I've ever seen. And they didn't even win it all.
You might be right, although, man, I was watching The Last Dance and just going through and watching the Carolina Jordan teams. I mean, Jordan and Worthy on the same team, and they had some other guys that could play too. That is not a bunch you want to face either. And of course, you had Patrick Ewing on the other side against Georgetown in one of those matchups. But that was so much fun going back and watching that for a minute and just thinking how different college ball was then.
You could have gotten every dime that I ever made. I want you to think about this. I mean, you're talking about Anderson Hunt, Grandmama, Greg Anthony, Stacey Augman. You know, I mean, that team was utterly loaded.
Moses Scurry was on that team, wasn't he?
Let's see.
Who was the dude inside that just kind of cleaned up?
No, he was.
He wasn't much of an offensive player, but yeah, he was the kind of the garbage guy inside.
There was also a guy on that team. Seems like his last name, or maybe it was another one of the team, maybe 91 or something like that. Named Gray. Does that sound right? Was there a Gray on that team?
Yeah, I'm going to look up 1990 UNLV as we're doing this. Man, this is why college basketball was better then. I mean, case closed, because we still remember this team.
Oh yeah, I mean that was still. I mean, I think about that team right now, and how would they hold up right now? I think they'd smoke anybody they played right now.
Okay, this is the 1990-91 team. Anderson Hunt was on that team. As you mentioned, Larry Johnson. Elmore Spencer. I forgot Elmore Spencer was on that team. He'd been at Georgia. Stacey Augman. George Ackles may be the guy I was thinking about.
Ackles, yeah, the big guy.
Greg Anthony.
I'm pulling it up right now. There it is. Everett Gray. That's it. Everett Gray.
Okay, I'm looking at 90-91. I'm going to go to 89-90. Let's see. That team went 35-5. The other one, the 90-91 team, lost that one game. That team, David Butler was on that team. A lot of the same guys. Scurry was done in 90, so he was on that team. Ackles was also on that team. Greg Anthony.
Oh, I'm looking at the 90-91 team too. Looky there. H. Waldman was on that team.
No kidding.
Yes, he was. I can't believe I just thought about H. Waldman.
Well, I think our listeners are probably ready for us to discuss something else. With that, let's go to the mailbag because there's about 6 questions there.
I think they need to calm down is what they need to do. You go ahead.
You're probably right. I have fun with these little rabbit holes. I don't know if the audience enjoys them as much as we enjoy doing them. We'll see.
Chris, stop. Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
Well, there you go.
They do. They do, I promise.
Good. Let's see. Today's mailbag is sponsored by Vanderbilt fan and independent insurance agent Josh Minton of Brentwood. If you need home, auto, motorcycle, renters, landlord, life, or commercial insurance, Josh is the guy to call. Contact him at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Facebook at JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. I think you'll be pleased. 5-Star Door says, assuming they get Romello White from Arizona State, what does he starting 5 in rotation look like?
That's a good one. By the way, I got to say, I don't know if that's a new poster, but I love that name. 5-Star Door. Well, let's see. The starting 5. This shouldn't be all that difficult, Chris. Do this with me. Clearly Romello White. Certainly there. Scottie Pippen Jr. I think you got to have DJ Harvey starting in that lineup, clearly. Who did I say so far? White, Pippen, and Harvey?
Yeah.
Okay. I think you got to throw Cleavon Brown in there.
Yep.
Now the other one, though, that's do we have Evans coming off the bench, you think?
I went to Sue with the 3 and put Evans as the 6th man.
Yeah. DeSue is the 3 and Evans coming off the bench. Yeah, I ride with that. That's mine too.
And then I'll go probably Lawrence as your 7th guy, backing up Pippen. Malora Brown is your 8th, and probably Wright is your 9.
Here's what I would say about that, Chris. Let's just live in a world where that's the roster and that's what's going to happen. I'll just say this: you could do worse with one through 9 than that. I mean, that's probably not a 20-win team. I don't know that it's an NCAA team or not, but you could certainly do a lot worse than that. If Wright is your 9, Wright plays hard. Wright bangs. Wright gets in there and by the way, it may be not be the most aesthetically pleasing offensive skill set, and it at times may look more like something that you see in a pickup game in gym class. But it works. It's effective, and I think we need guys like that. If he's our 9th guy, then I think we're headed in the right direction.
Well, we also forgot Ejike Obinna, and I don't think it's a great roster, but I think where they do have a luxury is post depth. They've got 4 guys who I think can play at some level in the low blocks, and that helps a lot because you have a lot of fouls to give at that point.
You didn't even mention Malora Brown in those top first 10.
Yeah, I think I said he was my 8 or 9. I thought I did.
Did you?
Maybe I said it in my head and not to you.
Lawrence said that Lawrence was the 7, backing up Pippen. And then, let's see, Obinna, 9. You said Jordan Wright, and then Obinna. You said you forgot Obinna, but you didn't mention Brown.
Here's how I look at it, okay? You've got your starting 5, and then your top point guard backup is Lawrence. Your top wing backup is Evans, and then your top post backup is probably Quentin Malora Brown. And then you've got Wright and Obinna also. I mean, you could technically go, if you wanted to put a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out there, literally as a second team, you could literally go Lawrence at the 1, Evans and Wright at the 2 and 3 in some order, and Malora Brown probably is the 4 and Obinna is the 5. So you could technically have a true backup at every position.
Yeah, and think about it. Look, this is a team that was forced to play multiple walk-ons at the same time in conference games last year. To me, that's a step up.
Yeah, the question is how many of these guys are more than just guys, right? I think that we think Pippen can be something other than just a guy. We think he can be a good point guard. Again, the defense needs work. I think that Romello White has already established that. DJ Harvey, again, I want to see what he is. He was a top 50 recruit out of high school and started for Notre Dame, although it was a bad Notre Dame team. But still, he's a fourth-year college player. Malora Brown, I thought, had a solid freshman year. It was at Rice in Conference USA. Big step up in competition. Cleavon Brown has proven he is a good supporting player. I don't know that he's a guy that you want starting in the post, but you might be able to make it work with some of these other guys. And again, you've got I don't see, and this has been the issue with them the last 2, 3, 4 years, they're having to play some guys 35, 40 minutes a night continually. I mean, you saw it with Saban Lee for 2 years running. You saw it happening with Darius Garland 2 years ago, although that was a little bit of a different situation. And I think Neesmith was headed towards that too. In fact, you saw it some. Now, depending on what kind of point guard Tyron Lawrence is, and he's more of a combo, but he played point a good bit in high school, and I think that was his primary position. Maybe for a change, your leading minutes guy is going to go 28, 29 a night, which is something they've not had in a few years.
Right. And, something else that we didn't even mention, of course, who knows? I mean, you know a lot more about it than I do. They didn't even mention Isaac McBride, unless I'm going crazy and you did and I didn't hear it.
No, McBride is the same thing. I don't know that he's been admitted to school yet. If he has, I don't think he plays next year. I think because of the sitting out the transfer year. Although if they do the immediate one-time exemption, that could override that. So, but either way, you've got.
For some reason,
Well, the point I'm making is you've got your backups covered. Again, how good these guys are, I don't know, but for once you can sort of say, hey, they've got two entire lineups they can go conceivably from the 1 to 5 with him or without him.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know why, for some reason, I keep equating Isaac McBride with being eligible in December or after December or whatever. And that's probably not right, but for some reason I keep equating him with that. But, if they were able to get that exemption or whatever the case may be, I mean, hey, there's even more point guard depth.
Yeah. I mean, he's just a huge wild card for reasons I've gone over again and again.
No doubt.
So,
No doubt. But he's still a possibility. So that's why I throw it out there.
right. Next one, let's see. I think, okay, I'll stick with basketball. This also from 5-Star Door. Who on the men's team can be a good shooter to help space the floor? I will preface your answer by saying, to me, that is this team's biggest problem. Because I'm not sure it has one. I think Dessou is the best candidate. I'm sorry I spoke before you answered, but it jumped off the page because I think, to me, when I look at this team, that is the biggest question mark I have is, do they have one?
Yeah. I mean, because we'll also be counting on some guys potentially that were not a part of this roster last year, or at least an active roster. Like I think DJ Harvey's supposed to be a pretty decent 3-point shooter, right?
I don't think he's any better than what they had. I think that was the issue with him coming from Notre Dame. That's why I wasn't as crazy about him as a lot of other people were, because I just didn't think his shooting efficiency numbers were very good. And I'll give you the floor to talk. I'm going to look those up just to see if I can back that comment up or not.
Well, yeah, I guess as you look over that roster, you're looking for somebody because I agree about Dessou. I mean, I think about the games in Kentucky. I mean, he has a nice stroke from the outside, and a guy his size and a guy with his length is not going to be overly bothered by a guy in his face. On the perimeter, he's not going to be locked down by some 6'9" defender who's all up in his grill. So he, with elevation on that jumper, if he can get some consistency by it, I think that he's one that could possibly be that. But as far as that roster and looking at it and saying, is there a dead eye shooter on it? Is there a guy that can get hot and that you can count on? No, I don't see that. I don't say, look, and I think that Scotty, he does a great job. He's so slippery and he moves and, gets people up off their feet. But from an outside shooting perspective, I mean, if I were an opposing coach, there's nobody on that roster in my mind that terrifies me to say, gotta have a hand in this guy's face or he's going to beat us to death all night. I don't know if that guy's on the roster.
Okay. At Notre Dame, my memory was correct. Harvey shot 39% from the field as a freshman, also 39% as a sophomore, right on the dot both those years. He was a 33.3% shooter as a freshman, a 29.9% shooter as a sophomore. Of course, he gets the year to develop his shot, but also the line is further back from where it was when he played. So that's the skinny on him. That's why I'm really hesitant to think that they have a knockdown shooter that they can count on. I just have some doubts about that. One other thing, I don't think this team is going to run the floor very well. I have some concerns about that. I think Pippen can get out on the break, but I don't think this is a super athletic. I mean, White can, Brown can a little bit, but I don't know that when you start stacking these guys up to the SEC, I think it's going to lag the field in that regard. But I'll tell you what it will have. It's got some big-bodied kids. Again, with the depth they've got and the ability to foul, they might be able to ugly the game up a little bit up and maybe wear some guys down physically. That's thinking out loud and speculating, but I look at this roster, and that's how I see it a bit.
I agree. Yeah, I'm riding with you on that.
Harvey's kind of a big-bodied kid, and Wright is too. I think both those kids could probably stand to drop 10 or 15 pounds.
Well, I'm not going to tell them they need to. I'd be the last one, but yeah, I mean, just or redistribute it a little bit. But yeah, I agree with that.
Well, that's where losing Saban Lee also hurts.
Yeah, agreed.
Because
Agreed.
they don't have okay, Harvey averaged .6 steals a game. Pippen's not a really good defender. I'm looking at this now. I'm thinking backcourt defense is going to be an issue too.
But can't we say that Pippen wasn't a good defender for a true freshman? I mean, can't that? I mean, can't because let me ask you this: the defender that you saw at the very beginning, as opposed to the end, he looked to me like he was a little scrappier defensively. I mean, a lot of times he was physically pushed around. I thought at the beginning of the season, I didn't think it happened quite as much in the end.
Probably not. And I'm talking a little bit out of both sides of my mouth here because, man, every time I would watch him try to defend the ball, it just was bad. But I also watch college basketball, and I wonder a lot of times who can defend the dribble anymore.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I don't know. I don't think we're quite headed to where the NBA is in those regards because look, I think there are still plenty of coaches out there that put a premium on that they demand that. And like I told you, look at the Final Four from the year before. Three of those teams were super defensive teams. Did Virginia get there based on their offense? Of course not. There is still a place for chin checking defense in college basketball. May not be on the level with the NBA. They sold out as far as that goes. There's not a team in the NBA. There's not a team in the NBA that doesn't average 100 points a game. Matter of fact, I think the lowest scoring team in the NBA averages like 103 points a game. But in college, even though it seems to be on the decline, and I agree with that, there's still a place for tough defense in college basketball. I guarantee that.
What little I watch of the NBA, it almost looks like it's a show for style points more than it is anything else.
It is what it is, Chris. That's exactly what it is.
Look at how big and athletic we are and how easy we move, but I don't see that anybody – now, I know it changes in the playoffs, but when I watch regular season, it just doesn't seem like anybody's that interested in just really getting in somebody else's grill.
Yeah, I'm going to pull that up here in just a second and look at those stats because, I mean, it's amazing. Again, there's not a single – here you go. I've got them right in front of me right now. The lowest scoring team in the East averages 102.9 points per game. That's the Charlotte Hornets. The lowest scoring team in the West averages 106.3. That's Golden State. But the best defensive team in the NBA in regards to points surrendered per game, according to this, let's see, in the West, it's the Lakers who give up a sparse 106.9 points a game. and in the let's see, team in the NBA. It's the Toronto Raptors at 106.5 points a game.
You know
that
what?
Is atrocious.
I don't have any time to watch pro ball. I mean, my life with just this beat and my kids and my wife working, I really don't have a lot of downtime to watch sports other than what I'm involved in covering, and what I do goes to baseball. But I'll say this, if I did, I think I would much rather watch this product than I would what the game turned into after the Knicks and those teams just really ruined it and made it so physical where they just beat you down and you couldn't call everything.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, to me, that's when I tuned the NBA out and I never really came back because I was used to that free-flowing style in the 80s with Magic and I mean, for some reason, I guess they didn't defend really well then. In a lot of ways, I wasn't bothered by it then either. I guess it's what you're used to.
Well, we had real actual centers back then.
Yes, that too. The game is much. Seeing a back to the basket post now, I mean, going back and watching it then and seeing that, it's really weird to watch, if you know what I mean.
Now when you're scouting your centers, you got to take into account how well they shoot the 3-point shot.
I know.
You
I
know,
mean,
I mean,
used to be
it's crazy.
you would shoot your center on sight if he shot a three.
Yeah. So I mean, now I love my Grizz and I like watching their style of basketball, but it's, I just feel that it's as different as college basketball is from what it used to be. When I look at what the NBA is right now, I don't think that college basketball is anything like that. I know plenty of teams that will check your chin, keeping you from getting to the rim. And I love that. That still exists. We need that. It's part of basketball. I have no interest in community center pickup basketball games that, when I score 136 in regulation and I lose, that's a problem.
Yeah,
That's a problem.
I think that's one reason I prefer the college game. They have not lost an interest in defense. Now, as you heard me, I thought that college basketball 8, 10 years ago was just almost unwatchable. And I think the rule changes over the last 2 to 3 years in particular, it is so much more an enjoyable product to watch. So this year just was not a great year to watch because you just didn't have that many great players. But the product itself and the way that the games play, it was so hard to watch a game for many years because of the excessive fouling and the no calls and the games in the 50s and sometimes the 40s. Now it's a lot more fun to watch to me.
Yeah, yep, I agree. I just wish it was more fun for us to watch it.
The next question, and we are going to shift to football here.
I like football.
In light of the shutdown, is it even possible for the new offensive and defensive coordinators to effectively install new schemes? That one from 5-Star Door.
Well, I mean, I think that from a schematic standpoint, yeah, but I mean, look, you got to have the reps. You cannot, there's no way to adequately replace live reps. There's just not. So, I mean, but the good news is they're not the only ones. There's other new coordinators all over the place. But yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and I think the answer's got to be no, at least for right now. I mean, look, I have high hopes because I think we upgraded at coordinator on both sides of the football. So I'm excited about that. But the implementation of it all, with what's happened, no, I mean, I recognize they're up against it. Their backs against the wall on this, which means that when they do get there, I think it's no time to waste. I mean, they got to get in there and get that done, especially those quarterbacks. And because remember, guys like Seals, and guys like who was the other? Musa was the other one in spring practice, right?
Yes.
They were just getting started. They were just getting started. And you've got 4 quarterbacks who were brand new to this team. All 4 of the quarterbacks on this football team did not play on this football team last year. And you're having to implement a new offense that was on the roster, that played that position, that they can draw experience from. Say, well, this is what we do, and then, in this situation, from a player standpoint, how they are. So not only do they have to learn the scheme, they got to learn the players themselves, what the coaches are looking for. I don't think it's going to be harder on anybody than it is the quarterbacks. So yeah, I think the coordinator's jobs are going to be very difficult. What about you?
I haven't really given this a ton of thought until now, and I think this is a great question. This is why. This is where this leads me to think. Let's say that you're looking at a bunch of teams in the SEC that are kind of even, or pick a league. It doesn't have to be the SEC, or even if this is top 25 rankings. And if you've got a bunch of teams in the middle of the pack together, if you can find the teams that aren't breaking in new coordinators, new quarterbacks, or a lot of new players, do those teams start to separate a little bit more than normal just because of the circumstances? I mean, and you had teams that never went to spring practice at all.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I think that's a fair observation and assessment. Yeah, probably so.
And then I think you
You
got
know,
teams in the middle. I think Vanderbilt's closer to the danger side because it had two new coordinators and a new quarterback, but at least they had some practices to get used to things. Although, if you look at Vandy, Ted Roof had a medical thing, and he, I think, made one practice, maybe two. So even there with that, even as little as they had him, or they would have had him, they had him even less because of that. So the more I think about it, it's even worse for Vanderbilt because it is breaking in an entirely new roster of quarterbacks and both new coordinators. Now, defense, you do have all those guys returning, which helps, but it's a new scheme.
yeah, if they're being asked to do something completely different, then I mean, on-field experience is great, but learning a brand new system, you don't just, you can't just hand them a playbook and say, go learn this. I mean, they have to get the reps. So I think initially it may be difficult, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially if one of these guys, and I don't know who it's going to be. I don't, Chris. I'll admit that. I mean, I have some thoughts about it, but if one of these guys is able to figure it out at the quarterback position, I think there's and everything's relative. I get it. We're in the SEC. I understand that. But I think there's pieces to this team that they can start to build on. I'm not saying this is a bowl team or not. I don't think it is. I'm 100% sure of that. But I could definitely see this team progressively getting better as the season goes on. Does that turn into wins? I don't know. But I could see them from an execution standpoint getting better.
Here's another thing I had not considered till now. My whole thing on the quarterback job was I thought that Seals had done a really good job of handling his spring and what I had seen. I thought he looked comfortable in the offense. He looked through his body language and the way he threw the ball like he was in charge out there. And again, that's different when you have blitzing defenders and play other teams, but you can only go by what you're asked to do. And I thought with what he was asked to do, I thought he did a good job with it. It also doesn't give him a lot of time to separate. In other words, if you're out there for 3 more weeks, I thought he was going to keep cementing that job and cementing it and cementing it. That's also reps that he loses out on. So we haven't seen Mike Wright play yet. I wonder if that does level the playing field for that situation. I have no answer to that question at all. I don't know how I begin to answer it. But that one pops up as we have this discussion too.
And I'm going to tell you something, man. The more, Mike Wright, man. Mike Wright, Chris, Mike Wright just looks, it seems to me like he has a skill set that I'm trying to think of some of the players that we have signed over the past decade and change at the quarterback position. From a stuff standpoint, especially today's game, I don't know that we've signed anybody like him before, Chris.
No,
I don't.
I mean, you would have to go back to maybe Eric Jones.
Man, I loved Eric Jones. Man, if he turned out to be like Eric Jones, I'd rub your feet for the next 2 months. Quarterbacks in the history of Vanderbilt. I used to love watching him, Jones to Boo Mitchell. And that's probably one of my that may be my favorite connection of all time, watching Vanderbilt football. But he just, I mean, that dude, he is so fast. And when you watch him run, it just looks so effortless. If he can display some accuracy, I mean, and think about this. I mean, as much as I like him, I don't even know if he's our best freshman quarterback. That's a good thing. That's a very, very good thing. And it seems like, I mean, look, I know we all saw that thing about the Zoom and all this other stuff, that Zoom meeting or whatever, and talking about how they wanted to, increase it up to like, what'd they say, Chris, like 80 plays a game? I don't see that happening or anything like that. But especially if the defense doesn't take a drastic step forward, you're not going to have the ball enough to have that many plays. But to increase the amount of overall plays that they're going to have, as opposed to last year. A lot of things would have to happen. A playbook would have to open way up. But that would bring a lot of opportunity. And I'm just going to tell you, man, even though they're young and they haven't done it yet, the quarterbacks that we've brought in, and you can't even leave out a guy like Danny Clark, Chris. You can't. Danny Clark's got a monster arm. I mean, a monster arm. One of the strongest arms I've seen. And I mean, what it sounds like, what I'd love to have, Chris, is a quarterback that we could roll all those guys into one, Musa too, roll them into one. But I'll be interested to see which one of those players' style fits this new offense the most.
Yeah, I mean, again, from what I saw, and I don't know how much of this is they tailored it to Ken Seals because they had two quarterbacks on the roster, but it looked to me like it was a really good match between what he could do and what they were asking him to do.
Okay, so take that same offensive sets, the sets that you saw, and put Mike Wright there. What do you think?
Well, you've got a lot more mobility there. Not that Seals is slow by any stretch, but Mike Wright's a state class sprinter, I believe. So that's a different ball game. Yeah. And you know me, I always love that type quarterback because I think the impact of that guy transcends the stats basically through third down conversions and keeping the clock alive. Like, you remember Josh Dobbs at Tennessee and just what a nightmare he was on third down. That's why I always think, when in doubt, if I have a choice between those two type of players, that's the one I'm going to lean to. But again, I was pretty impressed with what Seals showed me.
You should be. Look, I was pretty confident about Seals' ability coming onto campus, and you got to see directly. I mean, as a true freshman, early enrollee, the material is certainly there. But both of those guys, but from look, no doubt, when the play breaks down, I would say Wright's the guy. And, as having the mobility, and again, you mentioned it, Seals is nobody's pocket passer. He's whatever you need him to be. Is he a sprinter like Wright? No, but he's got plenty of mobility. But I think having the type of mobility, I think, is extremely important, especially for a team who right now, at this point, there's not a whole lot of answers on that offensive line. There's way more question marks than anything else. And if that's going to be the case, we're going to need somebody that, if it breaks down, the defense, at least on the snap, knows that, man, we can come get there, but if we don't get home, he's going to burn the crap out of us. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Kyle Shermer, love him. But if he needed a couple yards to get there, I don't know that he'd get it. He was excellent football player for us, but he's a completely different type of quarterback. And if we have protection issues, we need somebody who can do something with it and keep that in the mind of the defense at all times. Yeah, we can do this, but you overcommit. Mike Wright's going 65 yards.
And speaking of Kyle Shermer, Ann Arbador asks, what do you each think the odds are that Kyle Shermer lands on an NFL roster after being released from the Chiefs?
Chris, I would love to give you a good answer, but I don't know. I think one, it absolutely would depend on the right fit. Kansas City was not going to be the place. I mean, I suppose he could make a roster, but he was never playing clearly. I don't know, Chris. I mean, look, that position has changed. It just has. Yeah, there is definitely still a place in this league for the pocket quarterback. There's no doubt that there's still plenty of them in this league, and you can still win with quarterbacks that do that. But I've always thought that Kyle was good enough. And look, I remember his combine. He showed well. He's an accurate quarterback. I'll say this: I could definitely see him on somebody's practice squad. Because another thing you got to remember is now fewer teams carry three quarterbacks on their active roster these days. So Yeah, I mean, I suppose he could, and that might be me wanting him to. I don't know. Does he have the ability to? Yes. Will he? I'm not sure. I'm thinking about my own team and how I would feel if they signed him. What I would say about that is I'd be happy for him and happy for a Vanderbilt guy, but I mean, it wouldn't really move the needle for me, no.
I would probably feel better about it. It was if it weren't for the timing of his release, because he spent the whole last year with them, right? So they've already got some
Yeah.
things invested. To do that before they even get to minicamp or anything, to me is, I'm not going to say alarming. Now, here's how I can maybe rationalize a little bit. I don't know what their plan is at the quarterback position, but if there's a team that needs to develop a young quarterback, I can't think of a team that's got less of a need that than the Chiefs. I mean, they may want to just say, I mean, I'm thinking if you're them, you want to sign a journeyman backup, because that way, if Mahomes goes down, you've got somebody who's taking snaps and can learn things. So the Chiefs may be the type of team that has the least need for a Kyle Shermer too. And so I think you've got to weigh that against the timing. And oh, by the way, we're having a Lee Children meltdown that has spilled over into my home office here. So if you hear something, that's what's happening. I think that this is going to be really bad. Don't judge me, but I am in charge of homeschool here 2 to 3 days a week, and there are inevitably issues with getting the kids where they need to be when they need to be on time. And
That's
yeah, it's. I guess it's nice to know I'm not the only one who struggles with these things.
Hey, man. Hey, welcome to the Magic of a Live podcast, my friend.
That's right. There'd probably be a few more of these.
If it helps, I don't do a thing in the world.
Right. Well, I'm used to, you drop the kids off at.
Now I do.
Yeah, exactly. Bella's just made an appearance. You drop the kids off at 7:30 for school, and you get them back about 4.
Bella is in the house.
Bella is definitely in the house.
Bella's a gangster.
She has
No
requested
question.
to make an appearance on the podcast before, but she has dictated that will be entirely a discussion of unicorns and rainbows, and I didn't think our audience might buy that.
Well, that's what I was hoping to talk about today, to be honest with you, but we ended up talking about Vanderbilt.
You two could probably have a conversation about that.
Don't think we couldn't. believe me, it wouldn't be over my head, and it certainly wouldn't be over hers. What else you got in that mailbag, fat boy?
2 more. This one also
right.
from 5-Star Door. Do you think that Derek Mason and his staff have done a good job of connecting with Vanderbilt alums in the NFL, both past and present?
No, I'm going to make sure I hear the question right one more time, please.
He wants to know if we think Derek Mason has done a good enough job of connecting with Vanderbilt players who were in the NFL, both now and in the past.
Okay. So just former players.
Right. Well, he said former ones in the NFL. I think there might be a difference in how that question is answered between just former players and former players who've made the league.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's got one on his staff right now. I mean, especially on the recruiting side of things. Chris, I'm not really qualified to answer that question. I don't know. I mean, if he's reached out to him, I don't see him at games all the time or anything like that. I'm the wrong person to ask. Chris would definitely be much better at answering that question. I don't know.
Yeah, we addressed that back on the podcast that I did with Luke Wyatt. And I've heard some former players comment that they would appreciate more access than they've gotten. What I've heard, and this was from Luke, that they treat the guys that have played in the league a little differently than they do just the old alums who want to come back. So I've never given it much thought outside this question and outside of him saying that.
The other part is for me, how important is that in your mind?
I think when you're Vanderbilt, you need all the help you can get.
Agreed. I mean, but just the concept itself, not just Vanderbilt. I mean, Because I remember when Miami was just like that. They were famous for it, you know. That's whenever I hear that subject brought up, I always think about the Hurricanes. I don't know if they have, but what I would say is I think Chris hit the nail on the head with we can use all the help that we can possibly get, you know. But I think, because think about, let me say this to you. One thing that we heard, especially on social media, when there were, you know, not so long ago, when there was a whole lot of shakeup going on, when, you know, back and forth in the media, a lot of the former players were speaking out on Twitter. And they weren't surprised by some of the stuff that they were seeing, you know, and they were saying, look, this is what happened when we were there too, and all this other stuff. I do believe that it is important, not just for Derek Mason, but for that school period, to reach out to those cats and help to rectify that situation, or to, you know, to re-solidify that relationship, because only positive things can come out of that, Chris, don't you think? I mean, if they'll beat the drum louder than anybody. And how great is it to see, you know, I mean, look at these young cats. If they see all these cats that either were in the NFL or played at the SEC high level, getting out there, showing their pride, wearing their colors, you know, I mean, how cool is it, and how excited it is that we always feel about whenever we see like a Jay Cutler or a David Price or somebody like that, or Dansby, and they're wearing their Vanderbilt stuff, like in a post-game stuff. You know what I mean? And they got a Vanderbilt hat on, or they got a Vanderbilt jersey on, or something like that. Invariably, somebody's going to talk about it on the board, because it's a source of pride for us. We need more of those former players, professional and just regular regular players that didn't go on to play professionally, you know, to have that presence out there. And do we have that on a high level? No. Now, we don't have a ton of people in professional sports. I think clearly baseball and football are our best hopes there. Do we even have anybody in the NBA right now? I'm trying to think. We probably do, and I'm not thinking about it. Do we have anybody in the NBA? Luke Cornett, yes. Excuse me. Good grief, of course. We've got Luke Cornett. Other than that, I don't think we have anybody. But I always like seeing them represent their stuff, and I'd like to see more of it.
When things come up with what can Vanderbilt do better, where is it that I always go in terms of example?
Tim Corbin.
Bingo. And I don't know how much, well, I think you know this, obviously, but you're not around it to see it like I do. Like, if you go over in the winter, you're going to bump into former players. He's got that locker room for former players. You've got major league players that come and spend time there. They built this community that people want to be a part of. They've got minor leaguers that played at other schools. Like I said, the locker room for alums and all that stuff. Tim is the model for building that kind of culture. There's a magnetism to it. Now, it also helps that they win like nobody else, and it's not even apples and oranges right now. But the point I'm making is, if they ever get that program on solid footing again, I think you tap into the culture that he's created and you try to replicate it as best as he did, along with everything else that he does.
Yeah, because get it more than him. He just gets it. I mean, for all the stuff that we've had going on the last couple of years, basically seems like forever, but athletically, we not only have the best coach in the country in their particular sport, we have the best coach in the country in their particular sport by a long way, who loves his school, you know, who is entrenched in that program. I mean, think about it, Chris. He convinces players who are first-round picks to bypass that and come play for him for 3 years. Man, there is no way I would do that without some kind of really, unless, you know, coming over an injury or something like that, unless there was something really special going on, or there was somebody who could, think about having to sell that, you know, to somebody who could go in the top 20 of the entire Major League Baseball draft, and convincing them to bypass that, not only bypass it, but for 3 years. when anything could happen. You can get injured and blow your arm out and never play again and bypass all of that. But he's so good at what he does, he's convinced them to do that. And by the way, he's no charlatan. He's right, and it's worked. That's how good he is at what he does.
Last question. This is a good one. This is off of Vanderbilt, but he says, both of you, if you have time to talk about this, any thoughts, memories, connections, or stories you may have of a true sports legend, both on and off the field, given, and he's actually, I didn't read the question very well, but he's basically asking us to talk about Don Shula on all those things since he passed away this week.
I don't really have anything as far as that, other than just to say that I'm an Indianapolis Colts fan, have been my whole life. He took my boys to the Super Bowl. He was always a gentleman of the game to me. He helped change the face of football. I had the utmost respect for him. That's all I really have on that as far as Don Shula goes. What about you?
Do you know who my favorite team was before we got the Titans?
If you're a good human, it would be the Colts.
Well, I'm not a good human. It was the Dolphins.
Wow. You're pure trash in my mind, except because of Coach Shula. I'll let that ride this time.
This may change our relationship.
It's going to have to, man. You think you know a guy, and then you operate under. Look, I understood why you love the Titans. They're in your backyard. I got all that, but I never knew. You dastardly dog. I just assumed that you were a Colts fan your whole life until they came to town. I assumed everybody was.
I had bounced around with my loyalties as a kid, like elementary school. And then when the Dolphins drafted Marino, I just loved their style of play and fell in love with that team. So I made them my team. And they were for, I don't know, a dozen years. I was pretty hardcore, but they never really won much.
Oh.
They went to a Super Bowl one year because of Marino, but they never had a running game. They always had just mediocre defenses, and so they were just seemed like they were perpetually 8-8, 9-7. It wasn't a very, outside of Dan Marino, it was not a very exciting fan existence.
This explains so much, Chris. You know, I was never going to bring this up, but I remember about 14 years ago, Chris and I, we were in the press box at Vanderbilt, and we were eating some Chick-fil-A, I think it was, and I dropped one of my nuggets on the floor, and I was going to bend over to get it, and Chris got it for me, and he bent over to grab it instead, and his shirt raised up, and it exposed a lower back tattoo of a dolphin. I had no idea that that's what that was about, Chris. I just thought you liked dolphins. Thought you were trying, I thought it was your rebellious phase. I had no idea it was because you were a Dolphin fan.
What's disturbing about this is I had no idea I ever had a tattoo. I've got to.
Of course,
I may have to rewind a lot of my past. Start asking some questions here.
I want to say one thing before we get out of that. Get out of here because I got to get ready to do my show. I don't know if we've had a chance to yak much about the Colts and the Titans since the draft a little over a week ago. But given the offseason, and now things could still change. I mean, you could still sign a Clowney. We could. Who knows? But I think for the most part, I think you know who the Titans are for 2021, 2020/21, and same thing for Indianapolis. I think it's clearly one of those two teams in the South. I think the Jags are nowhere, and the Texans, we'll see. Taking your fandom out of it, and I'll take mine out of it as well. Who are you picking to win the South?
I think I still like the Titans, but I will be honest, I'm not as dug in on the Colts as you are. I mean, you do a daily talk show every day, and the draft was part of your job and responsibility, so you dug on it a little bit more than I did. I just know where they left off, right? I love
Yeah.
the way that offense ran under Tannehill. I think that they've got a couple more years of prime Derrick Henry. I think they've got some weapons in Brown and Jonnu Smith and maybe Corey Davis. I think they've got enough of a supporting cast. The question at tackle is going to be a big deal. I like the defense. They might still need to do some things there, but between that and my last glimpse at Phillip Rivers, I think I'm still Titans. Now, maybe if you gave me enough reasons, I could come off that, but I think that's where I am.
What I think about this team right here is what would be real interesting is I could see both of these teams emulating each other a lot offensively. Here's what I mean by that. I mean, look, there's no doubt what the Titans' bread and butter is. The Titans are not a team that are going to throw for 5,000 yards and try to, get into a track meet with you. They want to beat you. They're a big physical team that wants to just hurt you and lean on you in the second half and just run and run and run and run. They'll miss Jack Conklin. I like Dennis Kelly. I think the question is, does he start initially or does Simmons get the job? Isaiah Wilson get the job right away? He's a big dude. There's no doubt. They're physical. I like them. But you got to remember, I think Indy has the best offensive line in the NFL. Adding Jonathan Taylor to Marlon Mack and bringing in Roosevelt Nix, it's clear they want to beat people up. They saw what Tennessee did in the playoffs, and I think here in the second round, and I think that's certainly going to work. But bringing in DeForest Buckner, I think that, you know what that is? I think trading for a guy like DeForest Buckner is a message to the Titans. We are going to stop Derrick Henry. And the best way to do that is to allow Darius Leonard to be able to have all the mobility in the world. And how does he do that? By having a completely dominant. That's what DeForest Buckner is. I think these two teams I think they are going to throw down like they have never thrown down. I am so excited to watch these two battle this year. I think these are two of the better teams in the NFL. I think they are both, even though Tennessee went to the AFC Championship last, their arrows pointed up. And I think we are in for a year of battles of two regular season games that are going to be absolute wars on that football field, man. I really believe that.
The thing about Indy is it's such a well-run organization. Like you think of organizations that they might be down, they might miss the playoffs, but they're never down for long. Of course, the Patriots are on their own plateau, but you think of like the Steelers, the Packers, of teams that like they might not make the playoffs every year, but they're never picking third or fourth either, or rarely. And Colts are kind of in that range to where they're well run enough that they're almost always a factor.
What I would say to you is this. First of all, you're 100% right about that. But here's what I would say about Indianapolis. Chris Ballard, who I think you're just going to have a hard time finding a better GM. I love Robinson. I love Lynch. I mean, I think those are the class of GMs that are, I mean, for the list. Has not been willing to do, and I understood why, because he has been Hades bent on building this team through the draft and making it homegrown. But he wanted to make sure that he had the locker room right. He's got 5 players on his team from when he took over 3 years ago. That's it. He's overturned this whole roster with his people, and he wanted to make sure that he had the type of locker room and that he had a team ready that could absorb the big name free agents or the big trade pieces or something like that. You would never have seen him make a move like DeForest Buckner before this season. He felt that roster was ready. He's right. They said that they were going to build through the trenches. You got DeForest Buckner and Darius Leonard on one side of the ball, and you've got guys like Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly on the other side. And you bring in a Jonathan Taylor. I'm just telling you right now, I'm looking at Jonathan Taylor trying to run it at Jeffrey Simmons, or I'm looking at maybe Simmons and Nelson battling, at the point of attack on a couple of plays if they find themselves lined up against each other. I look at Vic Beasley. Can Vic Beasley get back to what he was in 2000? What was it, Chris? 16 or 15, when he led the NFL
16
in sacks? Maybe it's 16, maybe a change of scenery is exactly what he needs, and I could see him going up against Costanzo or Braden Smith off the edge. It's just, look, these two teams are poised. I'm going to tell you this. Both of these teams will make the playoffs. Clearly, one of them's going to win the division. One of the team that does not win that division is making the playoffs. They are, because there are just simply not enough teams better than those two. There's not. The only two teams that I can tell you on paper that I might favor, even though Tennessee pimp slapped Baltimore in the playoffs, on paper-wise, because I think Baltimore got excessively better in the offseason too, is Kansas City and Baltimore. There are no other AFC teams that I put above Tennessee and Indy. None.
Well, if it plays out like you think, it's going to be a fun season. It's been a fun podcast, too. I think we've got another kitty meltdown that is spilled over. And so with that, I think I'm going to run, because I think the clock is winding down on my sanity here. But tell folks about your show, where they can find it, where they can find you on Twitter.
Well, Chris, don't worry. That clock stopped years ago for you, brother. You can find me on Twitter at CheapSeatsBass. You can find my show on 101.5 FM in Jackson, Tennessee from 6 to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Hey, thank you, sir.
You know what? Thank you, my friend. I can't wait to do it next week.
It's always fun. He is Seabass. I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast.